Hello and welcome to another edition of our expert series on the outdoor workforce, presented with support from the VF Foundation. Today's session will focus on future trends in the outdoor workforce, and the experts we have with us today will help us think about the sorts of skills, talents, and jobs that will be in highest demand in the outdoor industry of the future. Before I continue, I'd like to note that we've made closed captions available for this session, which you can enable by going to the bottom of your Zoom screen and pressing captions and then show captions. My name is Chris Perkins, and I'm a senior director at the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable. We're a coalition of organizations across the outdoor recreation economy. And when you see these logos here, you can see that our members represent the full diversity of recreation activities, from hiking, biking, skiing, climbing, hunting and fishing, boating, motorized, RV, camping, hospitality, horseback riding, you name it. And that allows us to speak with a unified voice on behalf of the outdoor industry at both the federal and state levels. If you're just joining us for the first time, this is our final session in a 4-part series. We've held 3 sessions to date, all of which can be found on ORR's YouTube page. I will put links for them in the chat. The recordings of all of these sessions will be compiled along with a comprehensive library of workforce resources on a new outdoor workforce hub on ORR's website. And this week, we're going to get right into conversations with our visiting experts. The 4 experts we have today represent a great slice of the outdoor recreation industry, from manufacturing, design, and engineering to entrepreneurship, land management, and retail. Our first guest is a great friend and colleague, Kelly Davis, the Director of Research at the Outdoor Industry Association, Outdoor Foundation, and Cross Country Ski Areas Association. When it comes to data in the outdoor industry, Kelly Davis is that person. I've been fortunate to speak with her and listen to her and learn from her in a variety of contexts. And I'm delighted that she's able to join us today to talk about the data we have today and what it tells us about trends for the outdoor industry and the outdoor workforce of the future. So Kelly, thank you so much for being here. Delighted to have you and looking forward to your remarks.
Excellent, thanks, Chris. I guess first I should tell you a little bit about how I got here, how I arrived in this position. And it's a wild story. I mean, it starts really back in 1999, and I had the unfortunate experience of having cancer. And at the time, I was working in intelligence, and when something like that happens in your life, you do a lot of thinking about, what life means to you, what you want to do, what your passions are, what you want to put your energy into. And at that time, I decided, I wanted to try and find a job that I could mix my passion for the outdoors with what I did for a living, which really is it's math and communicating the results of that math to people that don't really like math. Or sometimes I tell people that I just do the industry's homework for them, both of which are true. But when that happened, I was working in intelligence. I looked at what the opportunities were across outdoor, and I just sort of stumbled across the research manager job at the Snow Sports Trade Association. I ended up taking that job in 2007, and I worked there for about 11 years, a little over 11 years as their director of research. And then, when the organization moved, I was looking for, new opportunities. And at the time, I just wanted to be distracted, and I just happened to be a pilot. So I ended up looking at the Aircraft Owners and Pilots Association, which just happened to be in my hometown, a place where I could commute to on a bike. And I ended up taking that job, and that was nice because I got to fly for free. That was pretty cool. And then about 1.5 years ago, the Outdoor Industry Association, the Outdoor Foundation, were looking for a new research director. And I thought, well, I kind of have to take that job. It's just calling to me. So that's how I ended up in outdoor. And my skill set really is just math and communications. One thing that I try and do for my industry is cover what's happening in the outdoor market. And we've got a lot of different pieces of information that are available to members and non-members alike. And 2 of those pieces of information include the annual participation trends report. And that's where we look at what's going on with participation across about 51 different categories in outdoor, everything from ice climbing to adventure racing to hiking to walking for fitness to snowboarding to hiking, fishing, camping, you name it. So we can see what's going on in terms of trends in those areas, in those particular categories. We can see where the most people are participating. We can see where the fastest growing categories are. And if you're looking for a job in outdoor, that's good information to have. You want to look at robust categories with lots of jobs, and maybe you want to enter into the outdoor market where it's fastest growing. This is all information you can get from OIA and Outdoor Foundation's Participation Trends Report, or from just calling me and finding out what's going on category by category. But if you're doing that, for instance, if you're looking for the fastest growing categories right now, I can tell you that in outdoor, that's pickleball and trail running. So there are going to be a lot of jobs available. Another thing that we do is sort of one-off studies where we think we need it most. And last year that was workforce. And what we learned is that at least half of outdoor companies are actually worried about being able to hire entry-level employees. And they're also, about a quarter of them are worried about hiring skilled professionals and also management and executive management to fill the positions that are going to be open, and they're projecting will be open in the next year or two. And they're looking for soft skills. They're looking for skills like team building, communications, and critical thinking first, before any of the skilled positions, even any of the skilled issues even get any play. And that would include things like, if you want to get into this industry, if you want to be a bike mechanic, if you want to be a guide, if you want to be a supply chain manager, if you want to look at any issue regarding logistics, you're going to be able to find a job in this industry. And it's just a matter of pinpointing where those jobs might become open. And that's looking at where the category is most robust and what are we looking at in terms of fastest growing categories. We know that 4.5 million jobs are connected to the outdoor industry. We know that by looking at the Bureau of Economic Analysis macroeconomic impact study that comes out in November every year. We know that this industry continues to grow economically. I mean, we are right now standing at $864 billion of gross economic output. So we can see the economic growth in the industry. But, excuse me, everybody, one dog can interrupt an entire Zoom call. But we're looking at growth and participation. So we're 10 million participants over where we were before the pandemic. Those are all lagging indicators. Participation, even retail sales are lagging indicators. One other place you could look for data is in business starts. And I don't know if anybody here has looked at the data on business starts starting in 2019 and going to now. I started looking at those about a year ago. And one of the things I noticed was just a massive uptick in summer of 2020. And at that point, I thought, wow, sometimes analysis produces results you don't expect. And I know exactly where to look for PPP fraud. But even now, we're seeing massive growth of business starts, and especially in outdoor, we're seeing those happen, especially in what we used to call Zoom towns, in places like Jackson Hole, in places like Mammoth, in places like Bend, Oregon. We're seeing massive numbers of business starts. So if you're thinking about working for a smaller company, one that's up and coming and growing, think about looking at where outdoor is growing the fastest and growing the most, and look at where the business starts are happening. So if you're looking for, say, a geographic location to work and a specific category to work in, you can get data that will guide you to those areas, that will guide you to the jobs that are open in very specific places. I mean, me personally, my dream job in outdoor, not that I don't have it, is actually backcountry pilot. And I got on just for fun. I got onto USA Jobs today and just typed in backcountry as a search. And sure enough, my dream job does exist. But we're looking at an industry that continues to grow and is going to need professionals far into the future. So if you're thinking about getting a job in this industry, my biggest recommendations are look at the data first and really think about what it is that you want to do in this industry. Because even people with muddled job paths like mine, where I went from intelligence to outdoor, that's not even a path, that's a jump. But if you're looking to do something like that, you can just figure out exactly what you want to do. What does your dream job look like? And then come to the outdoor data, like the outdoor participation trends report that I produce, things like the Bureau of Economic Analysis macroeconomic impact study that comes out in November. You can see which categories are growing fastest and where the jobs are available. And if you're looking for skills in the outdoor industry, you can find those in places like the outdoor workforce report that we produced with OSU and with ORR last year to see, what are employers worried about? What are they looking for? What skill sets are they looking for most often? So there are ways to pinpoint exactly where the job that you dream of might be and what skills you're going to need to fill that job. And there are places to find those jobs, including places like USA Jobs that offer thousands of positions in the outdoor industry. So remember, it's teamwork, communication, and critical thinking are the three skill sets that are most important to outdoor employers, in addition to the skill sets that you need to actually do your job. And if it's entry level, those are the three skill sets they're looking for most. So if you're looking at entering the industry in retail, if you're looking at entering the industry as a camp counselor or a junior guide, those are what they're looking for. And beyond that, there's a job for just about everybody in outdoor. Everybody from a supply chain manager to a top level executive. And the data will point you where you need to go. And if you can't find it in the data, give one of us a call and we will help you find a place in outdoor. So that's it, Chris. That's my pitch.
Kelly, you've given us an excellent framework to just approach the process of finding a job and using the data. I wanted to actually drill down on a specific piece of data that came out in the last participation report. And you and I can maybe think out loud here. One interesting piece of data showed that the number of core outdoor recreation participants has been in steady decline over the past several years. Core outdoor participants, meaning people who participate, say, 5 or 6 times a week or more, people who are really avid outdoor recreationists. Do you have any hypotheses about what's going on and how that might relate to the outdoor workforce?
But everybody just blames social media for everything. So, I think I'd jump on that bandwagon. People have a lot of things to do. And I think that multiple screens at the same time are haunting all of us. Do I want to completely blame technology and social media for a lack of outdoor activity? Not all of it. Not all of it. We are seeing people looking at outdoors, not in many cases, it used to be a lifestyle. So you could be a snowboarder, you could be a hiker, but now, a lot of the symbols of, let's say, status exist on social media and people are looking for experiences, and maybe it's just diversification of experiences. Maybe it's screen time, maybe it's a lot of variables that we can't actually put our finger on because they're having a small effect and we can't find them. But we are competing against a lot of other experiences that could happen indoors. So I think I would blame that generally.
Excellent. Kelly, thank you so much for being here and for sharing your wisdom and insight. And I'll just echo what you said, that all of us love these conversations, are willing to be contacted. So I'll be sharing emails after this. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Chris. Thanks for the opportunity. And it was my honor to be a speaker in this set of speakers, for sure. So I'm excited to hear what they say. Thank you again.
Of course. Our next speaker is Marcelino Alvarez, the Chief Executive Officer of Photon Marine. And Marcelino, as I queue up the video introducing Photon, could you first start by just telling us how you got to your role today? What's your outdoor industry career path?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, similar to Kelly, kind of hit a reset moment that led me here. Just kind of give you the brief background. I grew up in South Florida. I spent my summers in the Florida Keys, above the water, below the water. Always just grew up with a very sort of altruistic appreciation for the environment and conservation. I mean, I think back then, the idea of conservation and just kind of enjoying the outdoors is sort of like, hey, throw back the small fish today so they can grow up into bigger fish tomorrow, and be mindful of the reef today so they can provide for those tomorrow. And I think, as we look at what we're doing with Photon, I'd love to think that in addition to building, electric outboard motor systems for commercial boat fleets, we're kind of scaling up some of those principles. But my background took a pretty circuitous path as well. I started out going to college thinking I was going to be a biomedical engineer and then a doctor, and life had different plans. Engineering wasn't for me, and I wound up with a political science degree, a minor in Spanish, and a certificate in film because I've been working for a startup that was doing like video, putting video on the internet, and it could have been YouTube, but it was in the wrong city in the wrong place, and so it ended up not happening that way. I ended up graduating college and working for that startup for a little bit. And then I stumbled into advertising because the dot-com bubble hit and it took out that startup and many others, and kind of cut my teeth on a number of ad agencies that were doing really interesting things, putting content on the web and trying to figure out what the role of websites were for marketing campaigns. And that brought me from Miami, where I was working for a really cool agency, to Portland, Oregon, where I got to work for another really cool agency. And kind of learned along the way. Realized I got an opportunity to do some really cool things, and including building a graffiti writing robot that we took to the Tour de France in 2009, and came back from that and said that's the coolest thing I'll ever do in advertising. And if I stuck around, I'd be stuck there, sort of becoming one of those little curmudgeon-y types that always kind of harkened to an old ad campaign. And around that time, the iPhone had come out. There were apps in an app store, and I was like, I think I want to build apps. And so joined some friends of mine that I'd worked with, and we started building apps for other friends at ad agencies and eventually brands, and started a company that we grew over a 10-year period into basically just placing emerging technology in context for innovation teams. So whether it was apps or smart home or AI, ML, the short answer is typically like, well, you don't need this. You think you do, but you don't. Let's start with solving the problem, just kind of really understanding what a user would need and putting that first. Did that about 10 years and had some ups, had some downs, and I sold our agency to a larger consultancy out of Bellevue, Washington, and kind of was shifting into a chief product officer role there. And about 3 months after the deal happened, the pandemic hit, and it kind of threw the playbook out the door. And found myself, a year into the pandemic, kind of searching for purpose. And my kids would walk into our home office and see me with AirPods on, and I'd be working. And if I didn't have the AirPods on, I wasn't working. And I was like, whatever I do next needs to not be this. And so reached out to a friend of mine whose background was in fisheries nonprofits, and I was like, hey, what's a cool piece of technology that would be transformational to the world that you're in? And we talked about a bunch of things, but kind of got to electric motors. And I was like, that would be really an interesting thing to work on, something where not only do I get an opportunity to go to the outdoors, but travel to far-flung places around the world, bring my family along as well, so that they can see the impact of the work that I do. But also just reframing my relationship between work and place. So today I'm in an office. Later today I'll be at the shop. Later this week I'll be on the water. And my day varies from my responsibilities vary from day to day, and my context changes from day to day. And I think pre-pandemic, I don't think I would have necessarily jumped into a career into the outdoors. And then I think now I don't think I'll do anything other than that. So it was a circuitous path to get here, but that's certainly how we got started.
Excellent. Without further ado, Photon Marine.
So we're Photon Marine, and we're building electric outboard motors for commercial boat fleets in tourism, transportation, and mariculture. And what you saw there was a video that we shot at the Miami International Boat Show this year, where we debuted our first prototype. The way that that's sort of shot and edited, we wanted to emphasize how quiet it is on the water, and how you actually end up hearing everything else around you, including construction sounds or automotive sounds, or just the water rushing through the alongside the hull. It's been a fun path, kind of, being part of a startup. I've never, been part of a funded startup where I was, sort of in sort of the driver's seat, as it were. And so it's constantly, learning and adapting and figuring things out. I'll say that my background, if there was any indication, is that I'm not an engineer. I'm not an advertising executive. I've definitely been a generalist. And I think early in my career, I struggled with that. I was like, well, I'm a generalist. I'm not really good at anything, but I'm maybe good at working with people or kind of connecting dots. And I would say that to the generalists out there, there's hope. I don't think you necessarily need to be, excellent at anything. I think you need to be sort of curious and learning and be able to connect dots and context across different use cases. So as I think about what we're doing today, the types of resources and skills that we'll need, I will say that they do encompass a variety of disciplines. So if you're not a generalist, that's okay. 'Cause I think that there's certainly a world where your expertise could certainly evolve our industry. Yes, we're building electric outboard motors, but I'll sort of preface the rest of what I'll say around the fact that the skills that I'm talking about, I think, would be applicable if you're building an electric tractor, electric bike startup, or working in sort of automotive or even aviation. Everything is going to get electrified, and as we think through sort of the stack of resources that will be needed to support it, there are a few. The obvious one is engineering, right? So engineers with skills in either the power electronics side, control systems, electrical systems, whether that's mechanical engineering, naval engineering. Our system has software alongside of it, so software engineering, battery technology is obviously core to the electric vehicle industry, electric vessel industry. So whether you're a chemical engineer, working on novel ingredients to formulate a battery chemistry, or specialists in sort of energy storage and kind of grid and what happens when you have a lot of things that are electrified. Definitely an area where there'll be resources needed. I think beyond that, there's certainly technician resources that are needed, whether it's someone working on the shop that is good with machining, working with CNC machines, working with press brakes, drill brakes, kind of drills. So sort of I'm installing stuff into a vessel, and I would say that there's a shortage of people that just know their way around the shop, that can work on things, and I think that's true for us on the sort of manufacturer side, but also if you think about service technicians that might install our technology in other vessels or other vehicles. So basically being knowledgeable around all things marine. So installing electric boat systems, designing sort of the integration of cooling or integration of the outboard motor system into a vessel. Beyond the engineering side, certainly on the design side, and this is a place that's sort of like near and dear to my heart, thinking through the design of systems. And I think whether that's the digital interface that folks will see, on their vessel as like their instrument cluster, or a mobile application that you might need to check on the status of your fleet, or whether or not your boat is charging, to just thinking through the design of everything that's a brand moment, the logo design, the cowling, the motor, the system. So if you're less, mathematically or engineering inclined, I think the visual aesthetics of a system, the design of a system communicates sort of a brand aspects. I think those are certainly important. Related to brand, sort of the branded marketing side of things. I think the electric vehicle space, electric vessel space, will be filled with competitors, and beyond sort of a value proposition that one might see in a pitch deck. The brand can be a differentiation point. The colors, the logos, the aesthetics, the mark, the way that it communicates its tone and messaging, to the way that it advertises and where it advertises. I think those are all very important areas that'll need resources just to kind of bring the things, bring a product to bear, bring a brand to bear. Public policy, using my political science degree, I think as you think through the evolution of sort of electric automotive, transitioning from not being there to being everywhere, thinking through the role that public policy can play in it. So advocating at a local level for incentives around charging infrastructure, incentives around making it easier for commercial operators or eventually recreational boaters to make a switch to, hey, where do I charge? What would it look like for marinas in the future to have electric charging infrastructure present? I think that's also a lot of work to be done on a public policy level, being aware of certainly regulations that might impact the ability for an ICE motor to work in a particular area. Or more importantly, the incentives. We tend to favor more carrots and fewer sticks at Photon, and think through what are the incentives that make it easier for someone to kind of switch through. Beyond that, I think the sales side of things obviously important, whether you're at a dealer or working with a channel partner. For us, we work a lot with boat builders, really having sort of the ability to kind of parlay the opportunity, why the benefits of an electric product in versus its internal combustion engine counterpart. I think those are always always going to need good salespeople to kind of support things. And then as I think beyond sort of like the policy, kind of sales design and sort of engineer marketing side, I think you're going to need generalists that can connect those dots and really kind of bring those things together. So I think if there were, maybe 2 or 3 values that I would encourage, folks to think about, I think adaptability. I think it's certainly true at a startup. Every day is a little bit different. We're either searching for product market fit or an investor, or combining an investor with product market fit to make things work. I think endless curiosity, I think is sort of what has always driven me, and just being able to ask, either the seemingly stupid questions or the seemingly obvious questions, and not being afraid to ask questions, I think is part of it. And I don't know if you can teach curiosity, but I think, don't ever lose it if you do have it. And then a willingness to connect the dots. I think, so often the difference between a company or product that succeeds or fails is one that maybe, positions it slightly different or applies it in a novel way. And it's not even about the underlying technology, but it's sort of the application in a particular context. And so thinking through, how something might be applied in an area, in a way that perhaps doesn't focus on the obvious reasons why it might not succeed, but rather look at areas where something might not succeed. Look at the areas where it would succeed, and then a couple of tactical things that I think have always helped me in my career, advice that I've received from good mentors and just advisors over the years. The first is like take notes, and how you take notes, I think, doesn't matter. I think early in my career, up until maybe a few years ago, I just liked the tactile nature of notebooks, and I've probably stacked notebooks, entire bookshelves full of notebooks over the career, and I kind of like flipping back to them. But I think sort of this Zoom context that we find ourselves in, so these days I kind of switched to more digital note taking. Whatever the mechanism, take notes. There's only so much that your brain can hold over time, and I think it shows respect to the folks that you're meeting with, or customers that you're talking to. If you're not just nodding your head, but actually typing, taking notes, thinking through things, and then you can kind of go back and reference them later. And then another great piece of advice I always receive was sort of go take someone out for coffee, ask them questions, learn about what they've done, where they've applied it, and at a point in your career where someone asks you to a coffee, pay that back and say yes. And so I'm notoriously famous for grabbing a ton of coffees, and we'll extend the invite to anyone who finds themselves in Portland and wants to grab a coffee. Happy to grab a coffee. But I think the ability just to kind of get out there and build your network by meeting folks and grabbing a coffee is really a way that you can then kind of apply the whole connecting the dots kind of later on. So yeah, those are some thoughts on the electrification of everything, specifically as it pertains to marine, but I would welcome any questions or thoughts.
Marcelino, that was fantastic, both in terms of the specific jobs that will be in high demand and also the just your thoughts on the sort of skills that will be valuable for industry providers and the advice that you gave. I greatly appreciate that, and also wanted to conclude just by talking about thematically climate in the outdoor industry. Every industry stands to be affected by changing climate, but in some ways the outdoor industry more than others. And so we are an industry that's really going to have to lead on climate initiatives, and that can take a lot of different forms, from this very specific challenge of electrification of vehicles that have historically relied on internal combustion engines, also the charging infrastructure that Marcelino described, also ESG reporting at corporations, bringing advocates together to talk about climate, designing net zero projects. The climate-related opportunities in the outdoor industry are huge because we're the ones that need a healthy climate most. And I think your remarks really covered that today. So Marcelino, thank you so much for being here and for all the cool work going on at Photon Marine.
Thank you.
Excellent. Our third presenter today is Penny Wu, the Assistant Director of Recreation, Heritage, and Volunteer Resources at the U.S. Forest Service. And intro Penny, I wanted to share some information from the most recent National Visitor Use Monitoring Survey that the Forest Service puts out. This will give you a sense of what she has to think about in her role. So from 2017 to 2021, data from the Forest Service showed 156 million recreation visits to national forests. 95% of those visitors are satisfied with their overall experiences. 95% are satisfied with their feelings of safety. Less than 5% reported being dissatisfied with the value received for any fees paid in connection with their visit. And these stats are quite interesting. About 38% of visits to national forests, 42% of visits to wilderness areas are made by females. Over 15% of visits are from people who come back more than 50 times each year. Penny, hopefully that's a good intro to some of the things you think about in your work. And before you talk about your work, can you tell us about how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, you bet. Hey, thanks, Chris, and thanks to the Outdoor Recreation Roundtable, great partner of the Forest Service. Like Chris said, I do work for the Forest Service. I do think about those trends and visitation, and we've seen a huge change in our visitation and dispersed recreation lands, specifically on National Forest System lands, since the pandemic. And really that has provided a whole another set of visitors to National Forest System lands. Before I jump into that and some specific trends and workforce needs that we see in the Forest Service, a little bit about who I am and where I come from. Like Chris said, I'm an assistant director. I'm a Washington office headquarters employee. I sit here in Arvada, Colorado, Denver, Colorado. And I'm an assistant director of the recreation program for 154 national forests and 20 grasslands. That's about 193 million acres across this awesome country. The Forest Service, you might think, trees, what can trees do for my career, or what can trees do for my future? We are more than just forestry. Our mission, and this is really important, so I'm going to read it to you. The Forest Service's mission is to sustain the health, diversity, and productivity of the nation's forests and grasslands to meet the needs of present and future generations. I never knew that was our mission when I started 34 years ago as a toilet cleaner on the Green Mountain National Forest in Vermont. I knew I loved the outdoors. I loved hiking. You saw a picture of my intro there with my family, hiking here in Colorado, kayaking, dirt biking, mountain biking, all of it. Never did I think I would have a rich and rewarding career or make a career out of recreation, right? I started in Vermont on the Green Mountain National Forest. I was a student at the University of Vermont. And like some of my other panelists, I was accepted at UVM in the School of Business. And it was that first semester where I looked at my future classes and thought, geez, this really isn't me. I really don't want to take a lot of economics and math and business courses. I would love to kind of get into a career with the outdoors. And I stumbled upon the School of Natural Resources at UVM, and the rest is history. I started seasonally in Vermont. Like I said, cleaning toilets, talking to the public, picking up trash, doing basic recreation trail maintenance activities. And that led to an internship with the Forest Service, a full-time career starting in Vermont, and then led me to Colorado, a couple of promotions in Southwest Colorado on the San Juan National Forest, working not just for the Forest Service, but also for the Bureau of Land Management, very similar mission. And then was lucky enough to become a line officer, district ranger, overseeing my own unit of geographic land outside of Denver. And there I got to put to great practice not only everything that I've been able to gather in recreation, but also get to address things like fuels reduction projects, timber, range, and livestock management, caring for the land, and also serving the public. You may have heard that before. That's our mission, part of our motto. Sorry, not our mission. So the organization of the Forest Service, and where does this fit for future trends, workforce, and where you might be able to fit in. We are a huge organization. Like I said, 190 or 193 million acres across the country, national forests that basically, if you think of those key landmarks, those parks that you may have visited, Yosemite, Yellowstone, here in Colorado, Rocky Mountain National Park. If you think of those Park Service locations, the lands that typically surround those Park Service locations are your national forests. That multiple use mission covers more than conservation and preservation of lands. It covers everything from science and technology, research and development, fire and fuels, veg management, forestry, range, oil and gas, minerals conservation, engineering, not just civil engineering, architects, natural and cultural resources. So if you're going to school for hydrology, we want you. Soils, scientists, like I said, archaeologists, entomologists. If you're into bugs, we want you. My career has been solely in recreation, but from some of the work that I have done over those last 34 years, it's touched every single one of these different areas. And so again, when people think, Forest Service, I'm not a forester. What does my GIS background have to do with Forest Service? It has a lot to do with map making, geospatial and GIS coordinators. We hire all the time. So I want to talk a little bit about workforce and some of the future trends and workforce needs that we see within the Forest Service. We've been around for over 100 years, and I can tell you from working in Oregon and Colorado, parts of Michigan, there's no better place than the Forest Service. And what once used to be, a district ranger having to go out and mark timber, check on range allotments on the number of livestock that were out grazing, to maintaining trails, that went from basically one person, typically a male, and his family living in a cabin, maintaining that entire geographical or landscape, that feature, to a whole host of specialists, staff, and amazing field people. We have almost 30,000 permanent full-time positions. 30,000, pretty large agency within the United States Department of Agriculture. Like I said, I never thought I would have a career in recreation, but here I am 34 years later, and I never thought I would work for our headquarters. I always thought I would be a field person, either maintaining trails, recreation sites, fighting fire, riding horses, dirt bikes, ATVs, all those fun things. But now I'm starting to put that field experience and all of the skills that I've learned from working on different field units across the country to putting that to good use in terms of crafting policy, like climbing policy for the entire nation. One of my fellow panelists just talked about electric outboards, motors. So the e-industry, the e-bike industry that we're seeing take hold here in the last few years is part of the policy that we've created, part of my work now as a headquarters employee. Let me get back to the hiring. So 30,000 permanent full-time positions. So people like me, we're hiring more, and I have never seen in my 34 careers the emphasis that we are placing on hiring. Temporary positions have always been around 10,000, 15,000 across the country. So those are your seasonal positions, internships. Those are your what we call temporary positions. The emphasis that I have seen on trying to build our workforce here in the last year seems to be gaining momentum. We had a initial goal of hiring a few thousand people, and specifically for recreation, we were able to hire about 650 full-time employees at the end of last year. That's just in recreation. That doesn't take into account, like I've mentioned before, your fire and your fuels, timber, vegetation, some of those natural and cultural resource program areas. So with that 650 recreation new workforce, that's just a start in my mind. What our chief, who oversees the entire Forest Service, has committed to is a goal of filling 2,500 non-fire positions annually. And this really, I think, as a result of, again, some of that silver lining from the pandemic, we've seen a huge increase in visitation on National Forest System lands. And meanwhile, we have continued to lose through attrition and retirement some of our full-time capacity, full-time positions. There's an increase in those that want to get out on National Forest System lands. Visitation's gone up, and we know that a lot of our facilities have not kept up with those visitation numbers. So we're trying to build back, and the emphasis in the last decade to 15 years really has been to build our fighter program. So you've seen a lot of hiring across the Western forest, specifically with firefighters, and everything to do with land management in terms of fuels reduction and timber management, vegetation management. And now what we're seeing is that same emphasis happening in non-fire positions. So if you're interested in that career, I can certainly point you to or have a conversation with you about some of those 2,500 non-fire positions that we are setting ourselves up for annually. And these are entry-level positions. So if you're familiar with the grade scale GS, the pay system, in those entry-level positions are about your GS 5, 6, 7, and 7, 9, 11 positions, everything from $40,000 and up in terms of your salary. So we're holding 6 to 10 hiring events. Those will be specifically for those entry-level 2,500. I keep saying it because I can't believe it. 2,500 non-fire positions. That's huge. If we can hit that goal annually, that'll be amazing. And again, the goal of the workforce entry-level hiring is really, we want to focus on the agency's diversity and bring in a new diverse group that really represents and matches today's population in the United States. So when I think of some of the trends and specifically the question, Chris, you asked about that 5%, it's that 5% that we really want to reach. What the monitoring program is that Chris spoke of, National Visitor Use Monitoring. We implement that monitoring program every year on national forests, and we ask people that visit, what do you think? How are you feeling? How was your experience? So those customer service questions, other than, was the facility clean? Will you come back? So other questions about, what was your experience? Did this site make you feel safe? And would you come back? Those are kinds of things that we continue to kind of tinker with that monitoring use program to really get at the core of, are we meeting, the nation's, are we meeting the visitors' expectation when they come to National Forest System lands? I think that's my intro to the Forest Service. I hope we do have some interest out there, and I would love to talk more with folks during the Q&A.
You have me convinced, Penny. My home backs up to the Bridger Teton National Forest, so I benefit from your work every day. And thank you so much for being here. Greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm happy to introduce our final speaker, Rashad Frazier, the co-founder and creative director at Camp Yoshi. I met Rashad for the first time in person last week and was struck by how special it is to meet a professional colleague for the first time and also get to enjoy their cooking. Rashad is going to talk about the inspiration and vision for Camp Yoshi, which I should point out he manages with his wife, Kita, in addition to parenting 3 children. I don't know how you do that. Rashad, thanks so much for being here. And can you start by telling us how you got to where you are today?
Yeah, greetings, everyone. I'm Rashad Frazier with Camp Yoshi. We've been in operation about 3 years. But as far as my backstory, I'm a chef. Was a chef for about 8 years in New York City, had a restaurant and catering company, pretty successful. We focus more on experiential and events with the Sonys and the Nikes, like some really cool like pop-up experiences throughout the city. We had a restaurant in Brooklyn for about 4 years. Pretty much had a nice 15-year run living in New York City and operating in the food service business. My background, went to Howard University, originally got to New York City for a finance job. That didn't really work out all that well once 2008 happened, which is the financial collapse. So I found myself trying to pivot. And when I pivoted, I got into basically the food world. I had a few restaurateurs I met while I was working in finance. A lot of these guys were looking for folks to kind of help out with their P&Ls and raising funding and just trying to figure out the numbers around just operating a restaurant group. And doing that kind of, I fell in love with just cooking and fell in love with the process and just the romance of running a restaurant, running a business, if you will. So yeah, as far as my skill sets, it was pretty interesting to kind of have all these things completely opposite of outdoor work kind of happening for the past 15 years. Even though I grew up in North Carolina, spent a lot of time outdoors with my parents and my family. I wouldn't say recreation culture was a big word or a thing we thought of. It was more so just fishing and hanging out with the fam. So I had kind of entry level there, but I think by the time that got to New York, was working in that career, got pretty much away from all of that. Fast forward to 2018, my brother Ron, who's still pretty outdoorsy this time, is like, hey man, I got this idea. Let's rent like an old Land Cruiser, drive across the country. I'm like, dude, I don't have time for that. Like, where are we gonna go? Is it safe? Do we have a map? And he's like, just figure it out. Well, we got this app called Gaia. We'll kind of go to these cool spots and we'll just figure it out. So we end up doing these trips to nowhere, we call them, where literally we ship his car out to like an Arizona or to a Utah and just explore BLM land. which is public lands in the middle of nowhere. And I think doing that for a good 4 or 3 years, just getting our reps and all that, just trying to figure it out, having family time, meeting locals, demystifying these spaces, building community, cooking these amazing meals in a process. I didn't realize at the time we were getting our reps in for what we ended up launching Camp Yoshi. So fast forward to 2020, the pandemic. Once this happens, pretty much my entire business is pretty much in cahoots, like so many other restaurateurs and food service industry workers. I remember like it was yesterday, literally like around February, get the call, different clients are canceling, different accounts are shutting down. And I'm thinking to myself, oh, this is a temporary holdover. This pandemic thing will go away eventually. Come to find out, this was obviously a pretty major issue. So once we realized that we weren't ever going to be able to get back to what it was before with the food world, we were trying to find other options. I had a PPP loan that I had gotten from just, the restaurant pretty much closing and trying to figure out what was next as far as alternative options. At that time, also, my family had moved to Portland, Oregon. My wife had a job out here for a retail company. And I was getting pretty much, I guess, reconnected with nature as far as being in my own backyard versus being in New York City where you're kind of away from all that. And I think just being so close to it and just kind of being around other friends and folks who just had careers in outdoor space as far as guides or logistics or supply chain, it felt familiar in a way where it's like, okay, there could be something here as far as opportunity. So we ended up launching Camp Yoshi, which it was a little more unique than just offering a guide service. The thought process was, what does it look like to offer a camping adventure company, an eco adventure company around food, hospitality, and overall hosting? But not just hosting, but hosting people of color to get out to these amazing spaces in remote locations where oftentimes, growing up, in the Southeast, you hear a lot of the legacy of the outdoors has not been very friendly to our parents and a lot of our peers. So for me, these bigger, more, remote locations was kind of like the mountaintop as far as like, wait. Those are spots that we would obviously love to see on pictures, but as far as getting out there, we had no clue. So for us, it was like, all right, as far as all the technical experiences throughout our trips, we can hire locals for that. But in terms of the hosting component, that's where we kind of stepped in. So for the most part, Camp Yoshi is an adventure company. We are based in Portland, Oregon. We have trips that are set around BLM land in the Eastern Oregon, Central Oregon. We focus on Colorado as well, the San Juan Mountains. Bears is in Utah. But for the most part, the thought process is 12 campers come in, they camp with us for 3 nights, 4 days. All the gear, the vehicles, the provisions, the cocktails, the chefing, it's all included. You literally just show up. So all the barriers that typically plagues a lot of us in getting outdoors as far as POC, it's pretty much removed. All the guesswork is gone. We went live with Camp Yoshi in 2020. In year 1, I think we set up against having 6 trips. They all went pretty smooth for the most part. But the idea was, let's just kind of get our feet wet and see how we can go from there. My brother Ron and Kita are my partners. Kita kind of is like I guess the best way to describe it is if I'm the kite in the sky as far as like on the trips, Kita is the one holding the strings and Ron's probably the one blowing the air as far as the wind in terms of how we move and where we kind of go, if you will. But the thought is mainly around just trying to create a safe space for our campers to kind of really enjoy these spaces without all of the baggage and all of the barriers to get out here and have a good time. Go to the next slide, Chris. Thanks, man. All right, so just a little bit about our mission. It's been on thrill, been on confidence and community. Community is a big part of this because a lot of places we go to, you don't see many folks that look like myself. And I thought was, we bring a lot of baggage and just a lot of stereotypes and conditioning as far as what we think about these spaces. It's pretty amazing for our campers to really interact with the locals in those areas because the reality is the same guy you might be thinking is, triggering is the same guy giving you great intel on a hot spring, great intel on getting the best, ingredients and foods and local farmers markets. It's almost like you get to kind of see these really micro ecosystems in these smaller little towns and areas in America that sometimes have either been forgotten or oftentimes don't get a lot of interaction with our communities, if you will. So the community is a big part of it. Most of our campers are coming out solo. So being able to kind of have that, barrier breaking through the food and the folks we have as far as staff and the locals in those areas really kind of gives a confidence for hopefully them to come out and do this again on their own. Go to the next slide. All right, cool. So pretty much our admission is open to anyone. Usually it's mostly women of color between the ages of 35 and 45. They're coming in from the LAs and New York, to Atlanta, to Chicago, these hyper urban environments. And I think the contrast of coming out to these more remote wilderness locations is a nice juxtaposition around just trying to get away from it all. We typically describe our trips as digital detoxes. Because obviously there's no internet, there's usually no phone service. So you're really forced to be present, if you will. As of last year, we started really opening up our trips to a bigger market. A lot of companies are now coming on and say, hey, we love what you guys are doing. How do we set up against doing team building or recruitment of talent or maintaining our existing talent with your trips? The next slide, please. So ideally, that thought is trying to get these companies to understand that, hey, the same pillars that we have around, protection, connection, building community are all things that can really align with your company. We found that during COVID, obviously folks can't travel. Zoom calls are kind of just pretty much taken over. It's hard to kind of build that human connection, human element from that angle. So I think with our trips, a lot of these teams and companies are finding that, hey, we can kind of restore confidence, humanity, restore morale, build culture through our trips. And so last year was our first pilot program around doing an experiment called the Belonging Series. We took out a design team from a shoe brand here in Oregon, and those 13 campers were able to kind of really see each other for the first time. And as a result, the manager and kind of the folks put together the trip where we kind of find a lot more camaraderie and a lot more creative output from that experience. Next slide, Chris. Thanks. Oh, cool. All right, so but for the most part, Camp Yoshi was created as a reaction to the industry, if you will. There are not many adventure companies that are obviously of folks of color. Not to mention there are a lot of there's a lot of baggage and a lot of challenges as far as folks, having fears and concerns about getting into these spaces. I think us creating Camp Yoshi was our way of kind of just honestly creating a solution around inviting a consumer base and a user group to a space that typically has not been the most welcoming. I think a big part of what we're doing also is, you see these amazing spots and usually you're trying to figure out ways to sustain them and protect them so you can have more time to really experience and recreate in these locations. And so one thing we kind of implement on our trips is we communicate to a lot of the local managers, the BLM managers, that, hey, imagine having a group coming out and giving folks some reps to experience the locations so that when they come back on their own, they already kind of have some training in terms of how to tread lightly, how to navigate these spaces without, being responsible. So a lot of those educational elements, I think, kind of helps our trips really pop off more than others. But in overall, the brand is built around trying to really just create a safe space for more POC in these spaces and giving them opportunity to kind of experience outdoors without all of the barriers of entry. We're not doing these, the excursions are pretty amazing, but we're not doing things that feel physically or mentally inaccessible. So I hope you guys enjoy the presentation. Sorry, a little nervous here, excited. Also got this is our first time kind of speaking about just the brand in terms of what we're doing and how we offer it. But for the most part, campyoshi.com, a lot of information is on there as far as how you can find us. We offer trips year round, but overall they're open to anyone. But at the end of the day, we try to build programming and details around folks of color.
Rashad, fantastic. And what I really want to point out for the group here is two themes around community, one of which came up earlier around the increasing role of technology in our lives and the need to have spaces that are dedicated to detach from that and be one with community, which Camp Yoshi provides. And the second is community around identity. We've talked about how the outdoors has a history of exclusion and discrimination and the need for people who are really thoughtful about building spaces for communities to feel valued and welcomed. And that is what you have accomplished and continue to accomplish in Camp Yoshi. So we're grateful for your work. So to wrap up this series, a quick recap of what we've covered so far. We've learned that outdoor recreation spans all corners of the United States and generates $862 billion as an industry nationwide, along with 4.5 million jobs for the American people. We know that outdoor recreation takes place in all sorts of areas, from far off canyons to local urban parks. For this reason, many diverse types of organizations across sectors support the outdoor recreation economy, as shown here in this graphic from the Oregon State University Center for the Outdoor Recreation Economy. Outdoor professionals exist in so many categories, from trades, manufacturing, design of gear, apparel, equipment, vehicles, and infrastructure, to advanced business skills required to market and sell outdoor goods, to policy professionals who help ensure that Americans have access to the great outdoors. And we've put out a report showing some of the opportunities available in jobs across categories in the trades, manufacturing, infrastructure design, entrepreneurship, retail, public policy, and so many more. We also learned about the wide variety of academic and trade programs across the United States that support careers in the outdoor recreation economy. And lastly, one point we really want to drive home: outdoor careers do not require outdoor experience. In fact, many outdoor careers take place indoors, yet enable a quality of life for professionals that enables them to spend significant time outdoors. Thank you so much for joining ORR's Outdoor Workforce Expert Series, and for all the experts, including those today and those we've had on prior calls. And if it's not clear, the outdoor industry is a place for you with amazing career paths, and we hope you join us. Thank you so much for joining this series, and have a great day.